So first, some historical context. The period 70 years after World War II is not historically normal, and it's not internationally normal. During that period of 70 years, we saw a lot of ordinary people, a lot of ordinary families, people earning average or even less than average incomes, being able to own homes without significant debt, get things like pensions, basically own a chunk of the wealth. That is not common. If you go to most of the world, to be honest, outside Europe and North America, if you go to most countries in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, what you see is small, very wealthy elites and a very small middle class below that. And then most people don't own significant wealth. What they own is worth very little, and they live in poverty. And that was true in Europe and in this country, the UK, and in the United States for most of history as well. And that is basically, to be honest, that is the long-term history of sort of post-agricultural human civilizations, is you tend to have a small elite and a lot of poverty around them. In the history of this country, the UK, you do have sort of a couple of historical examples when working people were able to get themselves a little bit more power and a little bit more wealth after the plague, after the Black Death, when 50% of the population of Europe died. Working people were a bit more needed. They were able to get a little bit more of a share. You were able to see women get a bit more of a share than they did historically at that point in time. During the Industrial Revolution, you had a period where basically all of the world's production was happening in a small part of northwestern Europe. And after a lot of fighting, ordinary working people were again able to get a bit of a share. But even then, realistically, these societies lived in very high levels of inequality, most of the wealth owned by a super elite. But in the 20th century, this all changed, basically. People sometimes forget that even at the beginning of the 20th century, the 1900s, there was still really, really widespread poverty and extreme inequality, even in this country, the UK. My grandmother, who was born in the 20s, saw, I think, 3 or 4 of her siblings die of tuberculosis, which is basically a preventable disease of poverty. Yeah, people lived in desperate poverty in the early 20th century. But during and immediately after World War II, there was a really significant change here. And what you see, if you compare pre-World War II to post-World War II, is suddenly a massive increase in wealth holding of the government, and some of that wealth being held by the middle class, and eventually even significant amounts of working class wealth.